Do you want to know who God is? Well, you can get a glimpse of His glory in creation. But if you really want to see Him, you need to read His revelation. Hello, my name is Bobby Blakey, and I'm here to invite you to read the book of Ezekiel. What if we all read this ancient prophecy together? What if we saw a vision of the glory of God? And what if we experienced a revival in our souls? Well, if you want the what if to go to real life, you need to take a look in the book. The name Ezekiel means God strengthens, or it could even be a prayer. May He strengthen. There is a God of all grace who, after we have suffered a little while, will confirm, restore, strengthen, and establish His people. If you want to be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might, this is the book for you. Now, I don't know if you've ever read the book of Ezekiel before, but I do know one of the reasons people today struggle to read these ancient prophecies is we don't understand the context. We don't understand the timeline. So whenever you hear the name Ezekiel, you should think of the word exile. Ezekiel is one of the Jewish people who get deported to Babylon under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. So maybe you know that Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC. Maybe you know that date from history, that's the end of the kingdom of Judah, the southern kingdom, in 586 BC. But it's actually much more complicated than that. Let's look at the timeline. King Nebuchadnezzar actually first started exiling some of the Jews to Babylon in 605 BC. And Daniel is the famous representative from the first group. Now, Ezekiel is going to go in a second group that gets exiled to Babylon in 597 BC. So you can see there were actually 3 different times King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian army came in, took some people one time, took some people another time, destroyed Jerusalem, 586 BC. Now, Ezekiel is going to be prophesying after he's been exiled, so he's in Babylon, but before Jerusalem has been destroyed. Right here, where the arrow is, that's the timeline of the book of Ezekiel. He's in Babylon warning all of God's people that Jerusalem is gonna go and get destroyed. So let's open up the book and take a look at today's chapter, Ezekiel 1. And we meet the prophet Ezekiel right here in these first 3 verses. And you're gonna notice that this book has an autobiographical tone. He's saying, I was among the exiles. I saw visions of God. I looked and behold. So we're getting it straight through the eyes of God's prophet. Now we find out that Ezekiel is 30 years old. That's the impression right there from verse 1. We also find out in verse 3 that he is a priest and that he is in the land of the Chaldeans, which we've learned Chaldeans equals Babylon. We know where that is. And he's by the river there. Now, it's significant that it says that Ezekiel is a priest and he's 30 years old. Because according to Numbers chapter 4, verse 30, they would list all of the priests from age 30 to age 50. So when you became 30 years old as a priest, you got on the list. So this would have been a very significant time in the life of Ezekiel. If he was in the temple in Jerusalem, he would have become a priest at this time. But he's in Babylon. He's in exile. And one of the points that it wants to make is even there, God came to him. Like at the time he would have become a priest, he still was in the presence of God, even though he was in exile. When Ezekiel tells us that he's in exile, it means he's been removed from his native country, that he is feeling out of place. And you got to get a sense of sadness that comes along this. He's walking along the rivers of Babylon, but it's not his homeland. It's not the place that he wants to be. In fact, a great cross-reference to really get the feeling of Ezekiel 1 is Psalm 137. And it says, by the waters of Babylon, we sat down and wept. Here's the Jewish people in exile telling us how they really feel. In verse 4, they say, "How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land?" We don't feel like singing. This isn't a day of rejoicing. No, there's a sense that I don't fit in. This isn't the way it should be, and I'm feeling sad about it. There might be some people watching this video, and that's exactly how you feel. The point of these first 3 verses is Ezekiel wants us to know that God met him there. He wasn't at the temple in Jerusalem. He was far removed in another country, out of place, walking by waters that he didn't even think of as the place where he lived. And yet, God met him there. God showed him a vision there. God revealed his glory. See, we came down here to Inspiration Point in Corona Del Mar because we want to inspire you that you need to read what God reveals so that you can see God's glory. He will meet you right where you are at. Most of Ezekiel chapter 1 is a mind-blowing vision of God. And I say that it's mind-blowing because it's awesome and it's hard to understand. But let's think our way through it. Something is riding on the wind, riding on the clouds. And as Ezekiel begins to describe it, it's moving so fast, and there's like fire and flashes of lightning coming out. And as it's coming towards him, he focuses in verses 4 to 14 on 4 living creatures. Now, the creatures are described like with many faces and constant movement. It's hard. They don't slow down enough for us to get like a picture of them. But he brings up like a lion, an eagle, an ox, and a man. Later on in chapter 10, he's going to call these living creatures the cherubim. And you're starting to see already this vision that Ezekiel has is similar to Isaiah 6 or what John has in Revelation 4. It's just more complicated. People aren't as familiar with it, but he's seeing these cherubim, living creatures moving around. And then in verse 15 to 21, they're on some kind of wheels, and there's like wheels on wheels. And there's all this constant movement. And he's getting caught up in the sound of the movement and the way that the movement looks. And then, towards the end of the chapter, in verses 22 to 28, he looks above the living creatures, above the wheels, and he sees the throne. And now we're looking at the throne and who is on the throne. And we're beholding now a glimpse into the very glory of God. There's like this gleaming metal appearance, this shimmering, shining. It says in verse 28, like the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud on the day of rain. So was the appearance of the brightness all around. Just picture a rainbow. Picture the most beautiful colors and lights you've ever seen flashing out from this one who is on the throne. And then here comes the conclusion. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. Do you realize what Ezekiel is saying here? He's telling us he saw the glory of God. Now, the Hebrew word for glory is kavod, and it has this idea of something that is heavy, something that is weighty. And Ezekiel wants you to see it from his eyes, that there was one riding on the wind, one sitting on a throne, and he looked like fire, and he looked like a rainbow. And when Ezekiel saw God in all of his glory, it was so heavy on him. He was overwhelmed, and he fell down on his face. And then this glorious one started speaking to him. Now that's an introduction. That's an invitation from the prophet Ezekiel that he's describing it so you can see it with your eyes of faith as you read the word. Can you behold the kavod? Can you see the glory of God? How terrifying and beautiful it must be? Do you realize what's going to happen? If you and I come together and we read the ancient prophecy of Ezekiel, we will discover our future. That all of us are going to be in the glorious presence of God. We're going to all get to see his unveiled glory someday. And when we behold the glory of the Lord, it will be the best moment of our lives by far. It will be overwhelming to us. and we will all fall face down while his glory shines around. Do you want to know who God is? Then you need to read not just the description that Ezekiel gives us in chapter 1, you need to read what God says to Ezekiel in the rest of this book. And so I know some of you, you're all in. You've taken the prophet's pledge. Hashtag that thing in the comments down below. If you've been with us from the beginning of the prophets and you're going all the way through with us, let us know. But even if you're just joining us right now, if you're committed to reading the book of Ezekiel with us because you want to see the glory of God, will you leave a comment on this video and just say, I'm in to see the glory. I want to know more about God. Maybe it could even be a prayer like Moses said, God, show us your glory. Show me your glory. I want to see you. So you're invited, everybody, to come and read Ezekiel and let us behold the glory of the Lord.